Okay, let's see if I can actually do this time. My camera keeps stopping even though I'm supposed to have like 37 minutes of recording time. I came out here trying to avoid the noise of the mowers and the four-wheelers, but I've given up. So Isaac Kappy was my good friend. And I don't mean like I just knew him on Twitter, whatever, like a day or two after he first came out and exposed Seth Green with that video, I contacted him, gave him my number, like I told him my story, and he called me within 10 minutes. We talked for hours that day, and from then on we talked just about every day, either on phone call or text. I mean, I've spent whole days talking to him before, just shooting the shit sometimes, because I really liked him. The Isaac that you would see in those Periscope videos is not the Isaac. I mean, I hated those videos, man. They just misrepresented him. He would just ramble, and he was kind of a ham, I mean, obviously he was an actor, so but it was innocent, it was not. Sort of pissed me off so much. People would judge him so hard. Like, he was just a guy who had information, and he was one of the only people in Hollywood who's ever been brave enough to just come out with it, and people expected him to somehow, like, I don't know, be some type of expert on everything, or to have all the right opinions. Like, I argued with him plenty about Trump and how he just had this blind faith in Q, and but that's how he was. He was real optimistic, and he was kind of naive. He was also very, very intelligent, so don't let that fool you. He was very, very bright, and he was not a narcissist. I would never have been able to become such good friends with him and talk to him and become close with him if he were any kind of narcissist, egomaniac. He really wasn't. And he never hit on me or anything, like, at all. Not that makes that sound arrogant, but I mean, some people would wonder, like, why is he talking to a married woman? But he was just, he didn't want anything out of me. I had offered him money, and it wasn't even, I didn't have any money to give him, but I was making the offer basically to test some of the claims people were making about him, because he didn't know that about me. He had no reason to think that I couldn't give him money. And he did not want money from me. This was in private, and I had already won his trust and everything, so it's not like he was doing it because I might tell. I was one of his most dogged supporters. I was somebody that was, I mean, if you could look in my comment history on YouTube, I defended him till I was blue in the face from idiots in comments who were just... Man, I lost faith in the entire truth community, really, just seeing how they behaved and treated him. Somebody finally comes forward and does what everybody says they want somebody from Hollywood to do, and that's how he gets treated. He got just eviscerated, and people, and I tried to discourage him from the Periscope videos because I knew that people were just getting the wrong impression, and he just didn't really care what people thought. He was a lot like my aunt. I have an aunt that really is a lot like him, so I understand people like that. He was extroverted, very extroverted, and not self-conscious. And he really believed that he could win people over and, like, dispel the rumors and the suspicion about him just by talking and being honest and being himself. But he just, he never realized just how imperceptive, how judgmental, and how just, lacking in discernment most people are. Because he had given me permission to give his number out to, like, any channel that was, making videos questioning him, saying that he was a psyop, all this bullshit. And, not a single person I contacted, including a call for an uprising, by the way, who I have a, mutual friend who knows him personally. None of them would talk to Isaac. A call for an uprising gave the excuse that, oh, well, how would I know it's really him? So Isaac's like, all right, I'll give you my Skype number. And then he just made a bunch of excuses about why he couldn't do that. Because he'd already made his video, you know. He'd already made his video calling Isaac a psyop, like right away. And he didn't want to retract anything. Because these people are not your friends, all right? A lot of them are just up high in a tower, removed from everything. They don't talk to anybody. They don't interview anybody. They just sit there and run their mouths and give, you know, just judge others. And they, you know, they don't care about the truth. They've just become egomaniacs because of their following and their audience. And I can't vouch for anything that has happened with Isaac in like the past 6 months or so, like since he went out to Australia, because what happened was we were talking regularly, and, you know, he had introduced me to Fiona Barnett, and she trusted him enough to give me her phone number just on his word, you know, and I really respect Fiona. And I was supposed to download an app where I could talk to him and her without using international minutes or whatever. And my iPhone broke, like it wouldn't come back on. So I lost all my contacts. I got locked out of my Twitter. I have no idea how to get back into it. And, you know, but I'll be honest, like I was also just emotionally exhausted in a way because, and it was selfish because, you know, I had to spend a lot of time trying to support him personally and just like build him up and tell him like, you know, look, I know how you're being treated, and I just want you to understand there are people like me out there who really do appreciate what you're doing. And, you know, I see you for who you really are, because I felt so bad for him. You know, it wasn't like some type of idol worship situation. He was just somebody like me, like the only person like me I'd ever encountered who, despite not having been a victim of any of this, knew what it was like to realize some of the people you loved most in the world were evil beyond imagination, you know, and involved in this stuff. And, you know, that was kind of how we bonded, because I understood his grief of losing Seth and Claire. And, you know, a lot of people wouldn't even relate to, well, how could you love people like that? And just, you don't understand unless you've been through it. Like, unless you know just how subtle this is, how subtle these people are. And it's something that has to be like bred into them, I'm convinced. Like the way these families operate, you know, and the subtlety, the way they not only blend in, I mean, all the ones that I knew in Key West, like the people I know for sure were involved, they were some of like the best people, like some of the people that I liked most, the people that I would have, like I trusted the most. Like they were always exceptionally lovable people. And that's what's so confusing about it. And I really do believe programming, that's where the programming comes in. And I mean, Isaac, you know, as far as I know, he never concluded that Seth was, you know, programmed, but I mean, I'm sure that he was. You know, I think it's kind of par for the course. You know, I worried about him a lot, because even though he was like a really fearless person, I worried that it would eventually get to him, because, you know, one of the things that he always told me was like he did this because he was in a unique position of not having anything but a career to lose. He didn't have like, you know, a wife or kids, you know, even a girlfriend at the time, to worry about, you know, being used against him somehow. You know, people think, oh, well, he was a nobody. He did this to get famous. Like, that's just such bullshit. He was connected to, like Seth Green's a powerhouse in the industry, especially for somebody who's a comedic actor like Isaac. He made $50,000 on one commercial. Just that was just one. I mean, that was 1 day of work. So that's, and you know, he walked away from all kinds of connections and opportunities. You know, it's not just the people that you know that are super famous, that you know make a lot of money in Hollywood. You know, and for him to even get that role in Thor, you know, as small as it was, takes connections, and it also like makes more money than most of us make in, you know, a couple months. You know, it's crazy. And he did that because he cared about the truth, and he really loved kids. You know, he really loved children. And I had hoped that somehow through all this he would find like a wife and have kids, because that's what I wanted for him. But he told me that all right, how do I put this? So people had attacked him a lot for supposedly making, you know, baseless claims, like claims that, like, they said would discredit the truth community because he didn't have any evidence, right? Which is just bullshit, because a lot of what passes for evidence when it's just some random YouTuber that, you know, presents it is, you know, just going through somebody's Instagram and decoding hand signs and, you know, talking about what a cake represents, what, you know, the secret occult meaning of a birthday cake. And look, I'm not even discrediting that, because, like, you know, I actually, you know, from personal experience, I know that they are really that subtle, and it is worth looking into those things. But they held Isaac to a totally different standard, and it was just like a major groupthink situation from what I saw. People who knew damn well they didn't think he was a liar, but because everybody else started saying it, they had to be like, well, I have some questions, I have some doubts. And they didn't have any questions or doubts. And when he would talk to them directly, like with Titus Frost, I mean, you know, when he came on with Lift the Veil on Titus's channel, Isaac owned that conversation, and he really put everyone to shame, because you could tell he was being honest, you could tell he meant what he was saying, and that all these stupid BS, like, connections that Random Rants of Ryan was trying to make were totally bogus and ridiculous. And, like, you know, to try, he was like, he never claimed that he had never been part of Hollywood. He said, yeah, I worked in Hollywood. So how could you go through somebody's, you know, Hollywood resume when they come out as a whistleblower and then supposedly expose them for their connections? Yeah, he was also friends with Seth Green. You know, and Seth Green's, you know, supposedly a pedophile, because, you know, Isaac's the one who exposed that. That's how, I mean, what about me? Like, yeah, well, if you were to look back into my past, turns out I was friends with a bloodline Luciferian family, you know, that's related to, you know, Robert E. Lee and all this stuff. And what does that impugn my credibility? Oh, wait, I'm a whistleblower. What would I be blowing the whistle on if I weren't connected to these people? You know? And I was talking to Isaac on text as he was doing that interview, and I was actually the one that told him, like, hey, no, like, I was the one who kind of like set it up. I was like the go-between with him and Titus, and you know, it just got too much for me, though, because I knew what the truth that I, you know, knew from talking to him. You know, I can't say that I have literally no idea what he's been up to for the past 6 months. I heard something about him getting in a feud with Fiona Barnett or something like that, and I don't know anything about it. So, like, I intentionally stopped paying attention to it because, you know, it was just too disheartening. And Isaac was stubborn, so, like, if I would try to give him advice about, you know, hey, like, you know, about, like, the Trump thing or whatever, like, hey, maybe you should, you know, qualify some of your statements about Trump and Q, because it makes a lot of people think you're not credible. You know, he didn't, you know, he wasn't going to hear that, but it wasn't because he was being manipulative. It was just, he was the opposite. He was the opposite of manipulative. And, so anyway, back to the, you know, the things people say about, you know, baseless claims. Well, some of the claims that he made were things he got directly from me. He was the only person, and I told, like, so many researchers, so many well-known researchers I contacted with my information, you know, not only about my friend, but about Johnny Depp. And, okay, I'll tell you, the only 2 people, believe it or not, that actually did anything with it besides seemingly just gather information, which is what was weird to me. They would want to hear everything I had to say, and then they wouldn't do anything with it. They wouldn't talk about it. I just wanted it shared. I didn't necessarily want to be on anyone's show. I just wanted, you know, the information shared, like, not as fact, but just to get it out there, because I knew it would draw more people to come forward if they heard some of what I had to say. But only Isaac and Ed Opperman ever did anything with my information. Ed just, like, looked into it privately and did a lot of like research on his own. And he's, as far as I know, he's still looking into stuff. And Ed was a really big support source for me when I first went through this. He was like the only, Russ Dizdar, all these other people, they didn't do anything for me. But Ed, socialist though he may be, he is a good Christian and a good person. And he really like emotionally supported me and tried to calm me down, because I was terrified. I thought somebody might be coming to kill me. Like, I didn't know what was going on. And he reiterated the gospel to me and talked to me about like the protection I would have in Christ. And Isaac, he shared my information like right away. He didn't mention my name. And see, that's the thing, is he was acting as a human shield for people that would tell him things. He called it the Sosumi Challenge, because he knew a lot of people were too afraid to come out publicly. At the time I'm not anymore, but I was afraid for my kids and stuff, and it was all really fresh. So he did, like, he jumped on that grenade for me, basically. And for various other people. Now, with the Steven Spielberg thing, the reason that he came out and just flatly claimed Steven Spielberg was a pedophile, and, as he kind of insinuated that he knew directly or firsthand. He didn't flatly state that. Like, he just made it sound like he knew it for a fact, not that somebody told him. He did that for a reason. And, we talked about it. He told me I was trying to embolden other people who did have direct information to come forward, because he goes, I knew that I wouldn't get sued for it. I knew I wouldn't get, I knew nothing was going to happen to me, because I knew it was true. Everybody knows that. But he said, because I'm seen as a Hollywood insider, I felt that it would embolden somebody to come forward who really did have direct information. And that's what happened. Some actress that had, I forget, she worked on a set that either Spielberg was involved in, or he, was present at, I forget what, but she said something about, witnessing inappropriate behavior between him and I don't know if it was like, it was a child star. I think it was a female child. I don't know if it was like Drew Barrymore. It was irrelevant to me, because like I already knew. It's just really obvious if you look at Steven Spielberg, and all the things have already been dug up about him. But, there was a method to Isaac's madness. And, he specifically told me that he just knew he was in a unique position of not having, a family to worry about. But there's, that was a double-edged sword, because he also didn't have anything to live for. One thing I know is like I preached him the gospel over and over again. Like, not just, just the basic gospel, but I would just talk to him about, like, just to make sure he understood it and the wisdom of it, and the true gospel, especially, that it's not of works, and that it's grace alone through faith, and that, it's a guarantee of eternal life, that you can't lose it. And if you think you can lose it, you think you're working to keep it. And he was raised Christian. His dad was a pastor, but he'd had a bad experience with all that, because his dad was kind of a jerk growing up. But he considered himself to be, a Christian and a believer. But I never know with anybody what they're truly trusting in. Plus, people would, talk to him about like new age crap, and he was just open-minded enough to, I was just worried he'd be led astray. So I tried really hard to bolster his understanding of the truth. I was really compelled to do that. And because I thought, at the time, if anything happens to him, I just want to know. I want to know he's saved. I don't know anything about where he stood before he died. I haven't looked at any information regarding what his last words were, any of that stuff. I've been avoiding it like the plague. I can't look at my YouTube home screen, because there's just all these, YouTube thumbnails with this picture, and I feel so guilty because I wasn't there for him. I had a baby in the meantime and everything, I was breastfeeding, so I was really busy. I always intended to get back in touch with him, but I had to figure out how to, I think that he did end up getting my new number, but then that phone broke, and I still have the same number, but I had no contacts. So I just hadn't gotten around to it, and I hadn't caught up with all of the latest developments. But when I was talking to him, I mean, it was like I felt like a responsibility to be there for him, because I didn't know really who else would be, or whether people were going to turn their backs on him or what. But I knew what he had been through. I knew what it was like, and and I'm not a victim. And see, here's the thing: when you're a victim of this stuff, you've been through mind control, and you have major trust issues, and it's real easy to have, to lose trust in somebody for a while. I mean, anybody will tell you that's friends with one of these victims. I mean, bless their hearts, they are volatile emotionally. So, I just knew that, he could rely on me, because I would tell him the truth. And if he ever did anything that was suspicious or anything I didn't agree with, I knew, I would talk to him about it, and I would get to the bottom of it. And anytime people came up with claims about him, I mean, if I couldn't already, explain them myself, just as soon as I heard whatever, rumor or allegation, as soon as I would talk to him, I mean, he would thoroughly, I mean, he would always just laugh it off and thoroughly explain it. I know he had to, took a picture with, I don't remember who it was. Who was it? Was it the Media Matters guy? And I mean, I couldn't believe, because he posted on Instagram, and I couldn't believe people were actually using that against him, because he was clearly trolling the guy. It was so obvious. If you knew anything about his personality, he would absolutely do that. So would I. I would have done the same thing. So I'm not putting any of this as eloquently as I had hoped I would. I'm really just venting. See, this isn't the first time that I have lost somebody to suicide. The deepest hurt, the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my whole life was my little cousin committed suicide. 3 months after my first child was born. That was within that same year that, my mother died, my grandmother died, my aunt died, and a year before that, my ex-boyfriend, who I had grown up with since preschool, who was really just more like a friend, and we dated it was a mistake. We shouldn't have ever dated, but my friend Brad Argo, who was a victim of this cult and had confided in me years ago, before I knew about the cult going on in my hometown, what he told me was that his mother would make him participate in sex parties in Big Pine. And I didn't know what that meant, but now I totally know what was going on there. And he killed himself over it a couple of years after we broke up, and he left it in his suicide note. He hung himself. And, I had confronted his mother and stuff while we were dating, and man, she was so weird. Usually, if it weren't true, right, she should have been furious with me, and instead she just creepily tried to become my best friend. It was so manipulative. But anyway, but my little cousin killed himself, didn't leave a note, shot himself on the 3rd anniversary of my Aunt Robin, which is his mother, on her 3rd anniversary of her death. She was like a mom to me too, and he was more like my brother. And he was 5 years younger than me. So I have major wounds regarding suicide. And I just can't believe this has happened again to me. Just like with my little cousin, I had had a baby, and I hadn't really had a lot of time to spend with him. I lived right around the corner from him, a block away. And we were just planning a barbecue the night before. I called him and I told him I wanted him to come over for a barbecue, and he killed himself within an hour of that phone call. And he was so precious and so innocent. And anyway, so it's not like Isaac and I like knew each other for years, and like, we'd never even met, but I haven't even made any friends, hardly at all, online or otherwise, in years since moving here. And he was like the first person first new person I met, that I talked to on the phone. I don't ever talk to anybody on the phone, that I really cared for. I offered him, I told him he could always come stay here if he ever needed, like, to get away somewhere safe. My husband doesn't trust anybody and is skeptical of everything, but he believed Isaac. Now he's gone. And I don't know how much he had spiraled in the past several months. I don't know if he'd done anything to give people more fuel to attack him. I really don't. I'm not vouching for any of that stuff. I'm just telling you the person I knew. And I praise with the Lord. I really praise with the Lord, because I know it was God that prompted him to do what he did. And suicide's irrelevant to your salvation, by the way. Anybody who thinks otherwise needs to go ahead and read Scripture. Has multiple people killed themselves in Scripture that were considered saints and prophets, and it has nothing to do with, it just baffled me that people would think that would make you, like, you'd be damned no matter what. Of all the things, right? You're causing pain to others. And don't get me wrong, suicide's a really wicked thing to do. And it's a really awful thing to do to others. But, like, my little cousin killed himself and left his father behind, who had just lost his wife of 30 years, and that was their only child. And my uncle is estranged from his family and hadn't talked to them in 30 years, except his mother, who died years ago. And so his entire life was erased in that act. So I'm not just, suicide is a terrible thing to do, but Isaac, I can't say I blame him, because he did something brave and something heroic, and the people that should have backed him up, and the people that should have appreciated what he did, and also the people that should have realized that how they treated him would determine the likelihood of others coming forward. Maybe people that they would find more credible. Maybe people that they would just like better. Because, some people just don't like people like Isaac who don't seem to hate themselves. Sometimes people just, they get real bent out of shape about that. Isaac didn't hate himself. He wasn't terrified of what other people thought of him. And that just rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But, now, I would honestly beg anybody that is, that does have information like him, like, please just don't come forward. I don't know, maybe if you have, like, video of some, like, celebrity or politician, like, actually raping a kid, because apparently that's what people demand, and, you better be, the most likable person in the entire world and have absolutely no character flaws or personality flaws, because, the people that you think will embrace you with open arms and appreciate your information are the ones who are going to dog you the most, because everybody's more afraid of maybe being fooled by a psyop than they are concerned with the truth. And nobody has any discernment. What would even the point of that have been? Seth Green is a creep. It's obvious. All those people he's associated with are creeps. So, if it's a psyop, there's a goal and there's an aim to the psyop. And if you can't figure out what that is, they said to discredit the truth community. We discredit ourselves plenty already. It doesn't matter what the media thinks about the truth community anymore. They are going to discredit the truth community no matter what. There was plenty of evidence about Pizzagate. Anybody that actually looks into it, and is honest cannot come away without, saying like there's got to be truth to that. And the media still completely discredited it, and they even set up a false flag shooting. There's no way to win credibility from the mainstream media. And We cannot treat people the way that Isaac was treated when they come forward with their information and hope to get anywhere. Not that we're really going to get anywhere anyway, but I know from personal experience that this information, though it is not going to change the world, it is not going to defeat the shadow government, none of that, that the only person that's going to defeat any of this is Jesus Christ. But what it will do is win people to Christ. Because that's exactly what happened to me. And that's why it's worthwhile. And if people are truly seeking the truth humbly, they are going to be able to discern it, because God's going to help them, because he did it for me. And we need to stop being so worried about the credit in the straight world, because it's not going to happen. Also, it's becoming more and more obvious that despite all of this pizzagate stuff being absolutely true, if it weren't true, if all this information, like Svali said, if none of that were true, I would not have been able to follow it right up to my own doorstep and then get confirmation and go through everything that I went through. Or if it was all just fake information. It's absolutely true, but they also, they want us to know about it. So there's something going on. We're being set up, and I think my last video kind of goes into it better, but they are going to give you somebody who comes in and appears to defeat this evil elite that you've been so obsessed with. It's going to be just like the Lion King. They've given us a scar. Not sure exactly whether they intend to set up a red herring New World Order first, and then allow this champion to come and defeat it for everybody to trust in, or if just the current consciousness about the coming New World Order and the satanic pedophile elite, if that's enough, to make way for a hero to come who exposes it all and defeats it all and sets up a glorious golden age. Because I hear so many people, even so-called Christians, talking about how if it weren't for these elites, how great our world could be, how it could be paradise. And it's like, have you read the Bible? Have you ever looked in the mirror? Do you even understand the profound wickedness of your own heart? It's not just the elite. It's not just the Nephilim. It is us. It's us. It's every single one of us that is the problem. And if we were to cut the head off of this snake, that is, the current system that we live in, more heads would pop up, and they would be our own. Because the world is fallen, and only Christ, can